So is waterfront living in South Florida worth the hype or not? In this video, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and everything in between. Here we go. Welcome to the channel where we make videos about what it's like to move to or live in the entire South Florida area, and we hope you get value from them. We're also a team of realtors here in the area, and we make these videos to give you something that I didn't have when I moved down here 5 years ago. But more than we love making these videos, we want to hear from you. We want to help you. So if you're thinking about buying or selling a house anywhere in South Florida, feel free to call, text, or email us. We'd love to get on a Zoom call with you and best help you process your move. Okay, so it has been raining for about 5 days straight here. I really wanted to do this video with a nice backdrop in front of the water, but I'm sitting under a gazebo because it's storming and I don't know when else I'm gonna get out here to do this video. So let's talk about some pros and cons of living on the water in South Florida. And we're gonna start with the cons because I know that's really what you wanna hear first. So without wasting any more time, let's get into it. And just to preface this, living on the water in South Florida is considered a luxury. So con number one is gonna be the cost. It's gonna cost you. And I'm not just talking about the cost of the home to buy it, but other costs like your insurance. My business partner is actually at an inspection right now for one of you guys that reached out to us. And that's kind of what prompted me to make this video. It's a waterfront home in an older neighborhood. It's an older house. Pretty large house on the water, full ocean access, and it's $2.9 million is what it was priced at. Now that same home, given its size, if it was inland a little bit more on a dry lot, still in Fort Lauderdale, that same home would probably be about 1 to 1.2 million. Now if you take that home and move it further out west into the suburbs, you're definitely looking at under $1 million. Then when it comes to insurance, your hazard insurance is gonna be higher, and your hazard insurance is basically what protects you from any loss due to any natural disaster. So in our case, hurricanes. And of course, there's flood insurance too. Now there's a lot of moving pieces here. If you live out west in the suburbs on a man-made lake, you may not have to put up with as many of these costs, maybe not the flood insurance, but you're still paying a premium when it comes to living on the water. And just to give you an idea, the median price for a waterfront home versus a non-waterfront home is $850,000 for waterfront, and just above $600 for non-waterfront, 606 to be exact. And that's the entire South Florida area. Okay, con number two, it's gonna be repairs and maintenance. And again, this is gonna depend on where you live. If you're on a man-made lake out west, you're probably not gonna deal with as many issues as you would if you're out east. But a lot of you that reach out to us that do want to live on the water, you mostly want to live further east on a canal, something where you can easily get to the ocean. And aside from, being closer to the coast and having the threat of hurricanes and hurricane damage, you could be looking at sand and salt damage from the sand and salt that comes from the ocean and into the intercoastal and the canals. And when there's storm surging and high tides, that could eat up your dock and seawall. Not only that, but you can find damage to the exterior of your home. And even if you don't have a dock, you will still have a seawall, and they do have to be maintained and inspected. And sometimes erosion from the water over time, it will damage it. But these seawalls can last a while as long as they're properly maintained and inspected. But if you do have damage to it and it does have to be repaired, or it does have to be completely redone, you could be looking at a high cost right there. Con number three, it's gonna be flooding. Seems obvious. You're living on the water, there's a chance of flooding. But the reality is that no matter where you live in South Florida, you still could be at a risk for flooding even if you're inland. But living on the water, your chances are just that much higher. And so the seawalls, they are built up fairly high enough to usually prevent that. But when there's storm surges or high tide or the king tide, which we experience every fall, which is when the tide is pretty much at its highest throughout the year, water could get onto your property. Now, I'm not saying that water is definitely going to get into your house, but it's just something to be aware of, that you are at a greater risk for flooding when you live on the water, especially on a canal or just closer to the ocean. And there is always that chance, especially with a storm surge or a hurricane. Con number 4, it's gonna be the age of the home. It's just as simple as that. Typically, these homes that we tend to see on the canals and on the intercoastal, they're built up in older, more established neighborhoods, and the homes just tend to be older. And we see some of them torn down and completely rebuilt, but a majority of these neighborhoods, the homes were built in the 60s and 70s. And depending on your wants and needs, sometimes it just may not be worth it to keep up with maintenance on a home that's 60 years old, or to even just pay the higher price, the premium price to live on the water for a home that's 60 years old. But there is something that I will insert about this, and it's that when we were looking at homes for this particular client, we noticed that a lot of these older homes, they were original owners, or if not original owners, maybe they've owned them for 20 or 30 years. And typically, at least from my experience, I've noticed that homes that still have the original owner, or have been somebody who's been in the house for a very long period of time, they do tend to keep up with maintenance and maintain it pretty well, versus somebody who may have just come in and bought the home and did a quick flip on it. Original owners, I've noticed, tend to keep up pretty well with the maintenance. Now, if you do want something newer, you're just gonna have to pay maybe quite a bit more, or you can go out into the suburbs, find something that's on a lake, and that'll probably be more affordable. Especially up north in western Palm Beach County and areas like West Lake Worth and West Boynton Beach, they have some pretty good deals up there for homes that are on lakes. Con number 5, it's gonna be privacy. And I actually never really thought about this to be a con before, but one of our clients just recently sold one of their canal front homes. And while this wasn't the main reason that they sold it, they didn't like the lack of privacy. And what I mean is, when you're on the water, your backyard is usually exposed, whether it's to the home next to you on either side, to the homes across from you on the other side of the canal, or to anybody who's on a boat or a water taxi. And let me just say, I've seen some questionable things while being out on a boat. And I think some people just forget that their backyards are pretty much open and visible to the public eye. Now, if you want to take a guess on what you think I saw, let me know in the comments. And you might just think, why not put up a fence? Well, you can, but then you'd be blocking your view of the water. And that's just not typically something we'll see. We'll see gates surrounding people's yards, but not fences where it's blocking the view. And then when you see these lakefront properties, like I was talking about in Lake Worth and Boynton Beach, everybody shares the lake. So there's usually no division between your yard and your neighbor's yard, and it's kind of just like a big open grassy area. All right, so let's get into the pros. And pro number 1 is gonna be recreation. So you're on the water, there's a lot you could do. Now, this probably isn't water that you're gonna wanna swim in, but if you're into recreational things like kayaking, jet skiing, boating, fishing, this is all right at your fingertips. But maybe you don't care for any of this and you're just in it for the views and the serenity, the peacefulness of being on the water. Which brings us into our second pro, which is lifestyle, I guess, or we'll call it quality of life. Because living on the water is peaceful, it's serene. You may have really good sunrise and sunset views depending on which way you're facing. And looking at water has just been known to reduce overall stress levels. And I don't know the exact science behind it. You can Google it, but I'm sure if you've ever been to a lake or been to the ocean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So when I first moved here, my apartment was on a marina. And yes, sometimes you will have to deal with loud music or people partying out on their boats, but that just kind of comes with the lifestyle of living in South Florida. And it was okay for me because a majority of the time I didn't hear that. I heard the water crashing up against the seawall. I heard the rain hitting the water, and stuff like that is just very peaceful, especially when you're trying to sleep. Not only that, but you see some pretty cool wildlife. If you're living out east, you can see manatees and dolphins and stuff like that. So it's just very peaceful, very serene. And this is a dream for many people who want to come down to Florida. They want to be on the water. And pro number 3 is gonna be location. Usually these waterfront homes are located in prime neighborhoods or just overall prime locations. Maybe you're east on a canal that leads to the intercoastal or the bay if you're in Miami. You're close to the beach or the inlet if you have a boat. Or you can be in the suburbs in a gated community on a lake where you don't have ocean access, but you can still fish and take a small paddle boat or kayak out. And that's still really nice too. And overall location does have a lot to do with the purchase price as well, which brings us into our next pro, which is gonna be appreciation. And I mentioned earlier that waterfront living in South Florida, it's a dream for a lot of people, so these homes are usually in high demand. And waterfront homes have appreciated 13% since last June, in a year where home sales are fairly low, so that's really not too bad. But let me give you something tangible. I told you that my partner is out on an inspection right now on a $2.9 million home, 4-bedroom house, on a canal, no fixed bridges, ocean access. And if we compare it to when it was last sold about 5 years ago, it sold for about 1.4 million with little to no renovations. It basically doubled in price in 5 years. Now, not every home is gonna double in price like that, and that was a different time in the market, but it does go to show you the type of appreciation a very basic, outdated home on the water had, and the location definitely helps with that as well. It's in a neighborhood where property values are always going up. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, or if you have any questions. We want to hear from you, so give us a call, text, or email at any time. We'd love to meet with you on Zoom and help you buy or sell your next home here in Florida. I made it through this video without getting hit with too much rain. Now it's starting to come down, so I appreciate you watching. We'll catch you on the next one.